Hello everyone, I'm Jacob Kaufman, I'm the nerd on the street, and today we are getting started with Git. Okay everybody, this video is actually a viewer request. You have probably heard of Git. It's a version control system, it's incredibly popular, and it helps developers organize their code, keep track of the changes being made to their code, and collaborate on code, which is very important when we're talking about open source projects where the code is out there and we're asking people to make improvements. Git has been around for a really long time, and it was actually created by Linus Torvalds, the same guy who started the Linux kernel. Now, Git is a command line program, and today what I'm going to show you how to do is just basically the bare minimum to use Git. We're not going to be deep diving into Git because that would be an incredibly long video. There would be a lot more research I would have to do. But this video is for somebody who's never used Git before. Let's say you're walking into a project online and you're wanting to contribute a change to the project. You know what change you want to make to the code, but you don't actually know how to submit it because you don't know how to use Git. That's what this video is for. Basically, we're just going to be taking a look at cloning a Git repository, creating a new branch, making a change, and then submitting a pull request upstream. Now, the concept of a pull request, which you've probably also heard of before, that's actually a GitHub specific concept. Now, GitHub and Git, if somebody conflates those two and thinks that they're the same thing, that's a sign that they probably don't use very much open source software. They don't really know what's going on. Git, like I said, is a command line program. GitHub is a website that is entirely unaffiliated with the Git program, but GitHub is basically a web-based front end to Git. There are alternatives out there to GitHub, such as GitLab, and in fact, any code that I publish online, the few open source projects that I've written, some of my small programs, I publish those on GitLab in addition to GitHub. GitLab is actually open source and you can host your own instance of it. The GitHub website itself is actually not open source, which is pretty ironic, and there's been a lot of talk in recent years with developers of open source projects trying to convince them to move off of GitHub into other projects such as GitLab. Now, all of that said, I would love to make another video later about GitLab in particular and how to set that up. But for today's video, since GitHub is incredibly popular and since it's been around for a long time, I'm going to be showing you how to do this on GitHub. We're going to assume there's a project on GitHub you want to contribute to. Like I said, you already know the change you want to make, you just don't know how to submit it in the proper format. It's actually super easy to do, it's just a few commands. So without further ado, we're gonna jump to the desktop and get started. All right, guys, here we are on the desktop. Today we're gonna be using an Ubuntu 19.10 virtual machine here to show you this. And like I said, Git is a command line program. We're going to use it in the terminal. And the first thing we need to do is install it. So on Ubuntu, it's just going to be sudo apt install git. Super simple. I don't know of any distribution where it's actually called anything other than Git in the package management system. So whatever distro you're using, you'll just have to install that. Once that's done installing, we will be able to run git -- help, and we get some information about it, so we know that it is installed now. Now, like I said, we're going to be showing you this in the context of contributing to a project. So I'm going to open up Firefox here, and let's actually find a project that we want to contribute to. I'm going to go to github.com/JacobGKAU, which is my own personal profile here on GitHub. And I've got a repository on my account called test repo. We're going to use this repository for our video today. Now, a repository is really just a compilation of files. As you can see, this project doesn't have any code in it right now. Right now, all it's got is one single README file, and that README file just has some text. Theoretically, you could keep any sort of file in Git, although the GitHub terms of use are written to where it's really only meant for code. I'm going to log into GitHub real quick, which is going to be required if you are submitting code to a GitHub hosted project. All right, so now that we're on a GitHub project, you'll probably notice the green button here that says clone or download. So we're wanting to clone this repository to our local system, make a change to it, and then push it back up to the project online. So in order to clone the project, you will want to click the green clone or download button. And by default, if you've just created a brand new GitHub account, you're going to be presented with this clone with HTTPS option. Now, this HTTPS option will work if you're just trying to pull code down, and it will even work for submitting code back up to the project, depending on the project's security settings. if you're using the HTTPS link, when you go later to submit your changes to the project, you're going to have to enter your GitHub username and password in your terminal. Now, passwords can be guessed or cracked, and that's not very secure, so some organizations require using SSH to submit code instead of HTTPS. And if you're cloning with SSH, you'll use an SSH key to authenticate when you push rather than a password. And as you can see, the link is going to start with git@github.com : the organization that the repository is in, and then the repository itself. Now, before GitHub will let you clone using a Git URL, you'll need to add an SSH key to your GitHub account. In order to do that, we're going to go to our settings for our GitHub account. So in the top right, we'll go to settings. And once again, this section is specific to GitHub, but we're going to go to the SSH and GPG keys section of our settings here in our account. And this is where we can add a new SSH key. You can also use GPG keys. SSH keys are a little quicker to set up. So I'm going to click the new SSH key button here, and it's going to ask you for a title, which is really just a label to keep track of what key this is. And then we've also got the key itself that we'll need to paste in here. Now, I currently don't have any SSH keys set up on this system, so to make one, I'm just going to run SSH-keygen with no other options. We'll save the key in the default location. I'm going to enter a passphrase for this key so that if somebody steals it, they won't be able to use it without knowing my passphrase. And as you can see, we now have a private key stored in our home directory /.sh/id_RSA. And then we've got our public key, which is stored in .sh/id_RSA.pub. I made a separate video already about setting up SSH keys that goes a little bit more in depth on that. So it's really just the same process. If you've already got an SSH key, you can just use the same one actually. And we are going to cat out our .sh/id_RSA.pub. So this is our public key. And if you'll recall from my video about SSH keys, the public key is really not sensitive at all. SSH keys are asymmetrical. You just need to protect the private key. That needs to stay with you and nobody else. You can really just publish the public key. It doesn't matter if that is given to any other parties. And so there's really no issue with copying this public key and pasting it into GitHub. So I'll paste it in there, and then for the title, I'll call this Ubuntu 19.10 VM, just to remind myself later what machine this key is attached to. I'm gonna click Add SSH Key, and that brings us back to my list of SSH keys. You can see it tells you when each one is used, so if you've got a number of different systems and SSH keys, you can kind of keep track and make sure that if you haven't used this computer in the last 6 months, nobody's used that key in the last 6 months. But down here you can see the new key, Ubuntu 19.10 VM. So that key is now on our account. So now I will go back to my account. I will go back to my repository, and I will go ahead and clone this repository. So we're just going to copy the Git link here. We're going to come into our terminal. I'll go ahead and clear the screen. And before we clone the repository, there is actually one other thing I want to do, and that is going to be configuring Git on our local system. So we've got the public key added to GitHub. However, that is taking the place of our password, really. We still need to tell GitHub when we go to push our code later what account we're actually trying to push it under. So back here on our client, I'm going to run git config -- global user.email, and then this is going to be any email address that's associated with your GitHub account. I'm also going to run git config -- global user.name, and then this is going to be the name that your Git pushes appear as originating from. All right, once those two things are done, we can go ahead and clone our repository. So once again, we will just copy our Git link and paste it in here. Git clone, and then the link is all we need to do. So that is going to clone. This is the first time we are cloning and connecting via SSH to github.com. So it's asking us to accept GitHub's RSA fingerprint. That's fine, we will continue. And then we are being asked to unlock our private key. So this is the passphrase for your SSH key it's asking you for. After we enter that, you'll see we are going to receive all of our objects from the repository. And now if I do an ls, you can see we've got a folder here in our current directory now called test-repo, which matches the name of our repository. So if we go ahead and cd into the test-repo directory here, I can run git status just to check that everything is working and we are indeed in a Git directory. If I run that anywhere else, if I run git status in my home directory, it's going to say, hey, this is not a Git repository. But if we are within our repos directory, then we can run git status. And as you can see, it tells you we're on branch master, which is the default branch for most projects. Your branch is up to date with origin master, so we don't have any local changes yet. and there's nothing to commit because we haven't made any changes once again. Now, if you own the repository, you actually can make changes right in the master branch, and you can push them up and they will take effect immediately. But like I said, if you're trying to contribute to somebody else's repository, they're probably going to have their repository set up to where you need to make your changes in a branch and then create a pull request to merge the branch back into the master branch. So here's how we're going to do that. Let's say I want to add a file to this repository, but I need to do it through a PR, pull request. We're going to create a new branch for the change I'm about to make. I'm going to run git checkout -b to add a new branch, and the new branch is going to be called my new branch, just to make things easy. I'm going to run that command. It says switch to a new branch, my new branch. And now if I run git status again, you can see we are on branch, my new branch. We're no longer on the master branch. So at this point, we can actually start to make changes. You definitely want to make sure you remember to switch to a new branch before you start making changes, because if you don't, it just adds complications. So now that we're on our new branch, I'm actually just going to open up a GUI file manager. I'm going to come into our test repo. Here's our README file, which corresponds with this file right here. But I'm going to create a new file in this directory. I'm going to run gedit./newfile.txt. And we're going to open up a text editor. I'm just going to type, this is my new file. And I'm going to save this text document. You can see the text document appears in the directory. I'm going to close out of the text file. Now, let's do a git status again. And we can see if we do an ls, this is the same directory we're looking at in our GUI file manager, so the new file is right here. If I do a git status now, we see there is an untracked file. This file is the new-file.txt that we just made. So the git program is going to keep track of the files in our repositories directory. However, right now we haven't told Git that we actually want to include this file and push it back upstream. In order to tell Git that, we need to run the git add command. And we can either run git add on /new-file.txt to add just this file, or if you make a lot of changes in multiple different files, but you know that you want to publish all of the changes in the directory at the same time, you can just run git add dot, and that's going to add everything that is currently untracked in so that it's pushed back up. So now if we run git status again, you can see it has turned from red to green, and there is a new file called newfile.txt. And this is now listed under the changes to be committed. Now we still haven't actually created our commit yet. In order to do that, we'll run git commit -m, and the -m stands for message. So within two quotation marks here, we are now going to type in our commit message. Usually you want this to be as specific as possible, and if you're making commit messages as you go, then you can basically explain what you're doing in every file that you're editing as you're doing it, so that somebody later going back and looking at what you changed in your pull request can easily see your reasoning for everything that you've changed. Right now we're only adding a single file and we're only making a single commit, so I'll just make my message adding a new file, and we'll run that so we can see we now have a commit that has been made. One file changed, we inserted one line of text, and that was our new-file.txt file. So we've got the commit made, it's been made on our local system, and by the way, if you didn't run these commands earlier to configure your email address and your username, when you go to make your commit, this is the point at which you would get an error message and it would ask you to run these two commands, because the commit is actually marked with your email address and your name in preparation for pushing it upstream. And speaking of which, now that we've got our change made locally, we do want to push it back up to the project. In order to do that, we'll just run git push -u. The U stands for upstream here, and our upstream is origin. We want to push back to the origin repository that we originally cloned. And we're pushing to the branch, my new branch. So I'm going to run that git push command. And you'll see this time we're writing objects. And you can see in the background here in our web browser, we now have this message at the top of our page. Under your recently pushed branches, GitHub saw that we pushed from Git a new branch called my new branch. If we look under our drop down here, we can see my new branch. This was not here before until we just ran that command. And now to make a pull request on the GitHub side, all we have to do is click this green compare and pull request button. Now the pull request is once again a GitHub specific feature. Alternatives like GitLab have their own equivalents though. And basically what we want to do is explain as well as possible why we want this change to be implemented. So by default, it's going to take your commit messages and try and make a subject or a title for your pull request. So we'll call the pull request adding a new file, and then in the section down here under write, I personally like to go as in-depth and in detail as possible and explain why I made this change, why it's a good idea to make the change, and basically try and address any concerns about the change in advance. Basically, you want to convince the owner of the repository that they would be making a mistake not to accept your pull request. So in this case, I'll just type in this PR adds a new file to the repository. I'll go ahead and click create pull request, and now you can see we've got our pull request here. Now things are going to look different here depending on, once again, how the project is set up. You can see since I am the owner of this repository, I immediately have this green button to merge pull request. If you're making a PR in somebody else's repository, this button probably will not be green by default. Most public repositories are set up so that at least one trusted reviewer has to review the code and approve it before the PR can be merged. And then usually only trusted contributors are able to merge the pull request once it is approved. Now, if you've got somebody you want to request a review from, you can do that. If you have somebody you want to assign this pull request to and say, I want you to review and merge this, then you can assign somebody to it. If your pull request is closing an issue that's being tracked in the GitHub issues bug tracker, then you can mark that as well on your pull request. And people can leave comments and discuss your pull request. If we go under the commits section, you can see each commit that you've made along with the message with it. And under files changed, we can see what you're adding and removing with this pull request. Now let's say that we actually don't want to just pull this pull request into our master branch right away. Let's say we actually do want to make a revision to this pull request. We need to change something. We don't want to scratch this. It's a good idea, but we need to make a tweak before it can actually be put into the main program. Now, since I'm the one who made the first commit, I could actually just come back here, make more changes, run the commit and push commands again, and it would continue adding commits to this page. But instead, I want to show you how to do this from scratch in case you're trying to tweak somebody else's PR, or if you've moved between computers and you're wanting to pick up a PR where you left off. So just to simulate moving computers, I'm going to run rm-rf./test repo. So I've just removed our test repository directory from my computer. Now we haven't lost any data because everything we've done has been pushed. GitHub is providing a hosting service that is containing this information right now. Now, if I wanted to tweak this pull request, if I wanted to make a revision, as you can see, GitHub tells you right here, add more commits by pushing to the my new branch on jacobgkau/test repo. And this might look a little different if you're trying to tweak somebody else's branch. In some cases, GitHub will actually create a new patch branch just for patches to this PR. But I'm going to go back to the main test repo page, and I'm going to clone this one more time. So we're going to pretend like we're on a different computer. I'm going to git clone this repository, and we're going to cd into it one more time, cd test repo, and we'll run a git status. And you can see again, we're on branch master. Now we're wanting to be on the my new branch. So how do we switch branches? Well, we can run git branch-a to list all branches. And as you can see, we've got master right now, and under remotes, origin, we've got my new branch. So this is the one that we actually want to modify. So I'm going to run git checkout, and we're not going to run -b because we're not creating a new branch. We're just checking out the my new branch. So we'll run that. You can see branch, my new branch, set up to track remote branch, my new branch from our origin. So now if I run a git status, you can see we're on branch, my new branch. And this is actually pretty neat and pretty dynamic. If I come into our repository here, I can switch back and forth. If I git checkout master, you can see our new file disappears because that file is not in the master branch. It's only in our new branch. When I check out the new branch, our new file comes back. So that's pretty neat. At this point, I'm going to open up the new file, and I'm going to add, we needed one more line here. And I'm going to save that. Now, ostensibly, this is a code change that you would be making, not just more writing. But at this point, we can do another git status, and you can see we've modified a file this time. We don't have any changes to commit yet, so I'm going to do git add, once again, with a dot to add everything. I'm going to run a git commit -m with a message, adding one more line. And then we're going to run git push -u origin my new branch, just like we did before. And after we do that, if we come back and look at our PR again, our pull request, if we go into the pull request, you'll see there's now a second commit listed here. This was not here before. We can see the timestamps if we go under commits. 11 minutes ago, we made our first commit, and then 25 seconds ago, we made our second commit. And if we go under files changed, once again, files changed for the whole PR will show us this PR compared to the master branch or whatever the default branch we're trying to merge into is. So compared to the current master branch of the repository, all 3 of these lines are new. So they're all green, they all start with a plus. However, if we go to our commits and we take a look at just the second commit that I made, you can see this second commit added these 2 lines. It added a blank line, and then it added, we needed one more line here. So in this case, we're comparing what was here before this commit to what's here after the commit. And this is why developers like to use Git. And as you can see, GitHub is making it very easy to read, and that's one of the reasons GitHub is so popular. Because these 2 tools together, they really do help break down what is being changed and what's being done in code. So with all of that said, we can go back to our conversation tab here. I can leave a comment, say looks good. We can comment on that, and it's going to leave a comment here on the PR. And then I can click merge pull request. Now when I click merge pull request, what it's going to do is any changes that are listed here, it's going to push those into the branch that we're trying to merge into. So I will click merge pull request. This is going to be the actual message that shows up in our master branch for the pull request being merged. I'll click confirm merge, and you can see pull request successfully merged and closed because we don't need the request sitting open anymore if it's already been merged. Now at this point, if we go back to our test repo in a new tab, we can see we've got our master branch. We now have a new file in the master branch, and it's got our 3 lines in it. So we have successfully gotten that merged into the upstream program. Now at this point, we still also have a my new branch, and we still have the file sitting there as well. So this is redundant. We don't need my new branch anymore because it's identical right now to the master branch. And anytime somebody clones your repository, they're also going to be pulling down information about all the different branches you've got. So in order to keep things light, we do want to go ahead and also delete that branch, the my new branch, because it's no longer needed. If we refresh here, then as you can see, we only have the master branch, but it does have our new file in it. We can go in here to our new file. In the future, if somebody is reading this new file and they want to see when a particular line was added, they can click on history, and that's going to show them all the different changes to this particular file. And you can see my 2 commits with the 2 commit messages that I've made in this video. There's also a blame tab that does something similar with showing you the history, each commit, and what it added. So if there's a particular line of code that's causing trouble, you can click the blame button, find the line of code, look at the commit, and then blame that person for adding that line. So that was a very basic tutorial, but it did take up a good 38 minutes here. Hopefully this was useful to some of you guys who haven't used Git before. Like I said, anybody who's used Git is already going to know this stuff, but my current job, I use Git a lot for documentation purposes, and I had never pushed any Git commits. I had never made any PRs before I got there. So I showed up to this company and, had to be shown how to do this. So hopefully this is helpful for some of you guys if you ever do need to make a pull request, if you're asked to do this, or if you're trying to do this for an open source project that you're wanting to contribute to, now you know how. So for now, that's everything I wanted to show you. I'm Jacob Kaufman, I'm the Nerd on the Street, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.